This was in the West Point area of Virginia. His friend had this like party house where they would drink beer and, they would, play instruments. One night he went out to go to the bathroom just outside around, the back of this barn. And he said he saw this large white form and then a smaller white form right next to it. He was like kind of dumbfounded. He couldn't really make it out what it was. But then when he went back in to talk to his buddy, his friend was like, "Oh, well, that's Princess." And evidently this guy and his family have been seeing this albino sasquatch on their property in this swamp area for generations. My mind was just like blown at this. I've tried several times to get this guy to kind of like talk to me about it, and I don't think they're gonna open up about it.
I'd like to welcome a very special guest to Bigfoot Crossroads, world-renowned cryptid artist, Jonathan Dodd. Johnny Dodd, welcome finally to Bigfoot Crossroads, man.
What's up? Dude, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. This is awesome. It's long overdue.
Oh, for sure, for sure. If you have listened to the podcast previously, you have seen Jonathan Dodd's artwork. Jonathan is responsible for the Bigfoot Crossroads. I can't even call it a logo because it's so much more than that. It's a badass graphic is what it is. Man, I kind of know, obviously our talks and everything about the original concept and everything, but like, how'd you end up going the direction you did with the logo?
Well, actually, I think it probably came a lot from the music that you sent me, because when you initially hit me up, you're like, I have this idea, to branch out with, Bigfoot Crossroads. And, I have, a song in mind. I think one of your buddies produced it and you sent it to me. And as soon as I heard it, I was like, transported to my grandmother's house in like the early 90s watching Unsolved Mysteries or, something like one of those types of shows where you're just like, and I was like, okay, yep, I know exactly what I need to do. So it was an inspired moment. And that's kind of how I came up with it.
I mean, you nailed it. Needless to say, you nailed it. I think it's I may be a little partial, but I think it's one of the definitely better, if not the best, Bigfoot podcast logo out there.
Too kind.
Hey, I've had other podcasters tell me that. So
really?
Yeah, I thought that was pretty awesome.
Hell yeah.
I won't say their names, but yeah.
Let's call them all out right now.
Yeah, one by one. So originally I found you because I run a Facebook page for the podcast where I post all kinds of memes and artwork and articles and just anything Bigfoot related I can find, really. Mm-hmm. And I don't know exactly where it was I originally ran across your artwork, but you were doing like Bigfoot art, digital painting, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I started posting your stuff a little while before I reached out to you. What got you started doing Bigfoot art?
Bigfoot has just always kind of been something in my life that I have kind of latched onto. I'm not even 100% sure why, but it's just something that's always fascinated me. And when the pandemic hit and, we were all locked inside and everything, I picked up an iPad one day, just on a whim. I think it was my mother's iPad. She just let me use it. She handed it over to me, and I just started, drawing on Procreate. And for some reason, I would start out these painted landscapes. And then by the end of it, be thinking about, where could I hide a Bigfoot in this? Where could I put a Bigfoot and make it like a story almost.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that's kind of how it started out. And then from there, I kind of got more into, researching cryptids and stuff like that. And, just started branching out and doing different, monster art.
Yeah. That was one of the things that caught my attention early was usually whenever somebody, does an illustration of a Bigfoot, it's just kind of a classic, like witness style sketch or whatever, or their version of Patty or their version of Harry from Harry and the Hendersons. But you were doing actual scenes where the Bigfoot was the main subject, but it was almost like you were doing, like you said, stories, like witness stories, situations and stuff. And you had like such cool concepts.
I did try. I did kind of go through a phase of listening to Bigfoot stories, just on podcasts. I would listen to you. I would listen to like Sasquatch Chronicles, I think was one of them, and a couple other Vic Cundiff's station as well. I would listen to all of them, and I think just that repetition of hearing what happens during a Bigfoot encounter, kind of. Or what can happen in a Bigfoot encounter, like really like spurred my imagination on to like try to incorporate that into one scene. You
definitely hit the mark with me from some of the stories that I'd heard, especially like I remember one image specifically is like flashing in my brain right now where you had done like some Bigfoot up on the roof of like a cabin or a house or something.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, that's something I like early on in my Bigfooting, like that's something that I heard people talking about, like hearing something walking around on the roof. And I always thought how terrifying that would be and stuff, and how crazy it is to think that these giants would like climb up on somebody's roof, and kind of spy on him and mess around. And so whenever I saw your artwork depicting that, I thought that was crazy. I'd never seen anybody do that before.
Yeah. I try to find like little, weird, little scenes, from stories that I've heard and stuff like that, and try to incorporate it into my art.
Now, did you grow up hearing like local folklore and stuff where you're at?
So I grew up in Fredericksburg, Virginia, just a little bit east of Fredericksburg, Virginia. And, there's, tons of, Civil War and Revolutionary War history in that area. So it was mostly like ghost stuff. If we were talking about spooky stuff, it would always be like a Civil War ghost, or like the ghost of George Washington, or something like that. That would be like from that area. There's even a story from Fredericksburg about there's a ghost that haunts the Chatham Manor, and the Chatham Manor is sort of like this huge estate that is on top of a hill in Fredericksburg. It was abandoned in the Civil War, and they actually used it as like a headquarters for a little while. But as the story goes, back in the Revolutionary days, George Washington's friend owned that place, and there was this lady who tried to sneak out to meet with her lover down by the Rappahannock River. And George Washington caught her and told her she shouldn't be doing that. And evidently, like, apprehended the lover down by the river. And it's said that she comes back every 7 years to look for her lover.
Oh, wow.
And walks that same path down to the Rappahannock River from Chatham Manor. So that was kind of like a spooky story that we always kind of grew up with around Fredericksburg. Yeah, and I mean that's one off the top of my head that I can think of. But yeah, there's lots of like weird folklore that kind of happens, around those like historic areas.
I mean, you're from an area that's like really old for this country,
For this country, yeah, definitely.
Did you have stories? Like, did you hear any stories about Bigfoot and stuff? Like, did you have cryptids out there?
not really cryptids. And honestly, not even that much Bigfoot stuff goes on in Virginia. Well, I mean, I guess there's Bigfoot stuff that goes on in more like the western side of Virginia, but I never really grew up with that kind of lore.
Yeah.
That kind of came afterwards. I would, as a kid, I would go to like the library or whatever, and I would find the weirdo books, that corner of the library where they always had, like
the same corner you would find me. Yeah.
Exactly. Dude, we would have been in the same corner talking about Loch Ness Monster books.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's kind of where my introduction to cryptids and, monsters came about, was, going to the local library and just camping out in the weirdo section.
I mean, I know you already kind of said you didn't really know, but I'm going to push this anyway. What do you think it is about Bigfoot that like captured your interest and just like held on for so long?
I think just the mystery of it. Like, I mean, you think about, like what, some people say, it's an ape of some sort. If it's an ape, why don't we have one in a zoo? Like, I mean, there's just like we have every other type of, monkey and ape in a zoo. So why wouldn't, this be there? Like there's that whole mystery around it that has just kind of like grabbed my imagination for a really long time. And plus it's really fun to draw.
But there's a lot of artists, obviously I follow a lot of artists. I'm a big fan of artwork. That sounds weird to say, but I don't know how else to put it.
No, same.
But, there's artists that will draw Bigfoot from time to time, just because artists have huge imaginations and that's something cool to draw, like you're saying. But, I mean, you've, like, really kind of become part of, like, the online cryptid community and the Bigfoot world and stuff. You've kind of taken it a step further. Have you, like, gone on any actual investigations or outings with it?
Yeah, I actually have. I went out with Alexander Petikoff and Eli Watson once. I work for Small Town Monsters every now and then doing, documentary illustrations. So that's how I know those guys. And we meet up at festivals and stuff like that. And I heard that they were going to West Virginia to do an investigation for Beyond the Trail. And I hit up Alex and I was like, "Hey, would you mind if I came out?" And he was like, "Oh, dude, come out." So yeah, I mean, we met up in West Virginia, and I camped out with him for a couple nights, and we went out on a couple night investigations. Nothing crazy happened or anything like that, but it was definitely kind of like a moment where like I felt like I got my feet wet a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, that's a pun, because we were soaking wet literally the entire time. It was raining and it was crazy. It was what? Yeah, I mean, I had galoshes, luckily, but I mean, yeah, we were wet the entire time. But yeah, it was a good time. I may have heard some knocks. I don't know. I'm not 100% sure on that, but that was fun. Actually, here's a funny story. We were on this road, paralleling this river, and we were pitch black. You went totally dark. We had thermals, and that's the only thing we could see with, really. And we heard this huge crash like right next to us, and me, Alex, and Eli both just jump out of our boots, literally, and shine the lights up there. And there's this deer just standing there looking at us, and we like freaked out for a second. It was kind of funny. We all kind of laughed about that, but yeah. So I mean, it was. I'm sure you have stories like that too, where it's just like your heart's beating out of your chest, and then you just realize it's like a small animal just like chilling there looking at you.
Oh, dude, armadillos. I have cussed so many armadillos in my life, especially in the fall time whenever there's a lot of leaf litter, because an armadillo will they primarily eat like grubs and bugs and stuff like that. So they'll like shove their head underneath the leaf litter and they'll just plow forward a little bit and stop. And then they'll plow forward again and stop. So it sounds like footsteps coming towards you. And they're blind. They're practically blind. They can't see hardly at all. And they'll walk right up to you, in the pitch black dark. And you're like, oh my God, here it comes, here it comes, here it comes. And we had this one guy. He was actually, I think he was taking a piss behind the tent. And an armadillo came up. And, it was funny at first because he was kind of freaked out, It sounded scary coming towards him, and then he finally saw that it was just an armadillo or whatever. And he's kind of like, cussing it and stuff. And he kicked at it. He just like kicked some leaves towards it, and it was pretty close to him. It was just like a couple feet away. And the other thing about armadillos, in this part of the country, you see a lot of armadillos dead on the road. And the reason for that is because whenever they get scared, they jump straight up in the air. So whenever a car comes down the highway, they'll actually just like jump straight up and like hit the undercarriage of the car or the bumper and kill themselves. It's crazy.
Oh my God.
So this armadillo, whenever he kicked those leaves, it jumped straight up in the air, but somehow did like a 180 to where it was like facing right towards him. And whenever it hit the ground, it just hit the ground running and almost like it like ran into him and like started to climb up his boot and everything. And he started screaming like a little kid. Like, he literally screamed out for his mom and like stumbled around and took off running, almost fell down. We were cracking up. It was so funny.
Oh my God. Do they like bite or anything? Like, is there any like danger with an armadillo? I have no experience with armadillos.
No, I think they carry leprosy actually, which is kind of
weird.
Okay.
I think I've heard that too.
But I mean, I've had one come up and like sniff my foot before whenever I was a kid. And I can tell you from a child's perspective, the scariest thing about them is they have these huge long claws for digging in the ground. They like burrow down in the ground. But I mean, they look like they could just like slash you up, just tear you up if they wanted to. I mean, they never would, but that's the big scary part. But no, they don't bite or anything like that. I don't think they'd claw you. I'm going to keep on telling myself that they wouldn't, just to keep it safe.
I mean, can you imagine being the first person to see an armadillo and just trying to explain it to your friend, and then they're just like, "No, that can't be.
Oh,
that can't be a thing."
I think about that all the time. Actually, I think about like pretty much every animal you can think of was a cryptid at one point or another.
No, yeah, definitely.
And like all the different explorers and stuff all over the world, hitting like, imagine like the first people that came to North America and they're just like going across North America, discovering like new animals and like seeing things for the first time. That'd be so weird.
It'd be weird, but also really exciting and awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
I would be into that.
So are there any witness stories that kind of stand out to you that, you have like a tier list or anything going on?
Bigfoot related?
Sure. Anything. I mean, anything weird, man. We can start with Bigfoot. We can go into other things. I mean, have you talked to any witnesses or heard witness stories of other cryptids besides Bigfoot?
Actually, no, I don't think besides Bigfoot, I don't think I have. But, when I go to these like cryptid events, like to sell my artwork, I mean, it's basically an open invitation for people to come up and just, unload their weird stories on you.
Right.
And this is not me complaining because I absolutely love it. And even this last cryptid event I did, Cryptid Bash in West Virginia, I had a lady come up to me and tell me a really strange story where she was driving and she was driving through, I think it might have been the Allegheny National Forest, somewhere in PA, I think. And she was on this, road at like midnight, maybe even later than midnight. And she came around this curve and saw a squirrel walking across the road. And then after the squirrel, there was a possum. And then after the possum, there was a raccoon. And then after the raccoon, there were two Sasquatch children. She called them children.
Whoa.
and they were like walking, on all fours, but very fast, like across the path or across the road. And then after the Sasquatch, there was a deer. So she was like, it was the weirdest thing she'd ever seen, because it was, it was just like one after the other in, size order.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that was like a really strange story that I heard that just kind of came to my mind right now. But yeah, so these events, like, I mean, people come up to me and they just tell me all kinds of things.
That sounds like that Stephen King movie, Dreamcatcher. Was that the name of it?
Oh, yeah. I haven't seen that one in a long time.
Like all the different animals are like running past the cabin or whatever. Yeah. Like, that's crazy.
Yep. But yeah, it was pretty wild. That's a wild one. I'm trying to think. Oh, and then another one at that same event. This one lady came up to my brother, actually, because he was like handling money and stuff for me as I was kind of like schmoozing and talking to people. And she came up to him and was like pointing at one of my paintings, and she was like, the one I saw looked exactly like that one. And so she told him the story first, and then when I came back to the table, he pulled me aside and was like, hey, talk to this lady for a little bit. And so I talked to her for a little bit, and she was telling me a story about this Sasquatch that looked exactly like the one in my painting, where she was walking her dog down a very heavily trafficked path. I think this took place in West Virginia, and a Bigfoot was walking up the path the opposite way, like towards her. And she said she kind of stopped and watched it walk up, and then stopped to kind of like make sure her dog was still kind of like at her side, and then looked up and it was gone. So, and something about the painting that kind of like caught her eye, she said, was the snow. Like, it was a snowy scene.
Yeah.
And she was like, we were walking, doing like a winter hike on this path, and that kind of like jogged her memory. So I thought that was really cool as well.
Have you done like witness sketches for people yet?
Nothing like close up. I did do one for a friend of mine, actually, who says he had an experience back in high school. This was in the West Point area of Virginia. And this area, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it at all, but it's like right on, it's out in almost the Chesapeake Bay almost. I think it's off like the York River, and there's also the Pamunkey River, but it just goes up the east coast of Virginia. And he said that he was at a friend's house, and they were in a band and they were partying and stuff. And his friend had this like party house where they would, drink beer, and, they would, play instruments, and they would just party out there. And one night he went out to go to the bathroom just outside around, the back of this barn. And he said he saw this large white form, a large white form, and then a smaller white form right next to it. And he was like, kind of dumbfounded. He couldn't really make it out what it was. But then when he went back in to talk to his buddy, his friend was like, oh, well, that's Princess.
Princess.
Princess. Yeah.
Right.
And so he had to get the guy to elaborate. And evidently this guy and his family have been seeing this albino Sasquatch on their property in this swamp area for generations.
Wow.
And I was like, my mind was just like blown at this. And I've tried several times to get this guy to kind of like talk to me about it.
Yeah.
And I don't think they're gonna open up about it. But it's one of those stories that just kind of like has stuck with me. And I've actually done some artwork around it. And getting back to your question, he asked me to recreate that scene basically. So he sent me a couple pictures. He sent me, and then he sent me like a detailed description of like what the property kind of looked like. And then I kind of took it from there. It wasn't, exactly like a, eyewitness drawing or anything like that, but, it was kind of like the look and feel of, what it would be like to be in a field and see, these two giant forms, chilling there watching you go to the bathroom.
That would be insane, man. I don't know which, that's a lot to unravel because like,
right.
Imagine like seeing it first off and like, your mind's blown, you're freaking out, and you go back in and tell them and they're like, oh yeah, that's Princess. Like,
right. I know, what? Right? Like, it's so weird.
You weren't going to mention Princess before I went out to take a piss? Like,
yeah.
By the way, you might run into our pet albino Sasquatch while you're out there, but it's okay. That's nuts, man.
So yeah, I mean, I may reach out again just to see if, I can glean any more information out of this, but it seemed like that was kind of it. And this is all, well, he saw it, but all the information is coming from an outside source that I don't have access to. And he feels a little, I wouldn't say intimidated, but, like weird about talking about it.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I don't know how I would get any more information on that, but it would be cool. It'd be cool if I could get something else out of there.
I mean, yeah, it's cool that he told you about it to begin with, though. I mean,
right. Yeah. And the only reason he did was because I had been posting so much Bigfoot artwork.
Oh, wow.
He reached out to me and was like, hey, can I tell you something? And I was like, yeah, of course. And, that's where it kind of like led off. And yeah, of course my mind was blown, but
I've had like similar stuff happen to me. Whenever people that I knew found out that I was into Bigfoot and that I took it seriously, a couple different people have hit me up and, hey, can I tell you something, but don't tell anybody, that type situation.
Yeah.
And it's always like the last people you would ever expect.
Right. I think, I don't know, like not just Bigfoot, but like weird stuff. I think it happens to everybody, but it just kind of depends on your radar, your own radar, and then like what you're willing to, put out there.
Well, not to come across offensive, just I'm completely ignorant about this, but like, is Virginia part of like the Appalachia area?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So like more like the western side of Virginia, is like right there on like that whole strip of Appalachia. Yeah.
What's the deal with that place, man? Because that area has to have some of the weirdest folklore of all. And
it really does.
I've like seen people talking about stuff and it's like beyond folklore. It's like, yeah, this stuff is real. People see weird stuff and experience crazy things all the time.
Have you ever been out this way? You ever been out east?
I haven't. I'd love to, but I never have.
Well, the only way I can really explain it is you would have to be there. Like, I mean, it's so strange, like, because you can step into these woods in these mountains and you can just kind of like feel it. I don't know. It's a feeling. It's like a primal feeling. Like it's so old. And the Appalachian Mountains were, part of like the oldest mountain range in the world. And, when all the continents and stuff were together, it was all part of like the same mountain range. So like stuff, that was in Europe could have, had free range into what is modern day North America,
Yeah.
So I mean, it's like, I don't know. It's a just very old, and when you go there, you can just feel it.
Do you think there's some kind of connection between the paranormal, cryptids, and all that stuff, and these areas that are really old and have lots of history, especially whenever you get into terms of like geography, like really old places, because it seems like there's a lot of stories from there.
I think so. Also, that area was like heavily settled by European immigrants. So European immigrants are bringing over their lore, their monsters, their fairy tales, and they're, meshing them, with, Native American stuff. And, they had their beliefs over in their country, and then they're coming over here, and then, it kind of gets like melted together with like Christianity and other religions. And I mean, it just kind of like, it's a melting pot, really. So I think that has a lot to do with it as well.
Do you guys got any lake monsters out there?
Yeah, actually we do. And this is more like towards like the Maryland side of Virginia, but the Chesapeake Bay is home to, or evidently home to, Chessie, the lake monster.
That's clever.
Which I guess is sort of like I know, right? Some sort of lake monster up there. And honestly, I don't really know any of the stories around that. I just know that it's like a local cryptid of that area.
I mean, what do you think about lake monster stuff? Because I mean, we recently talked about Loch Ness, you know, but lake monsters and sea monsters in general are something that, you know, if you follow human history, people have been talking about them forever, and they're talked about all over the place. And those kind of things always catch my attention. So what do you think's going on with that? What do you think about Loch Ness and all that stuff? I
mean, there's got to be something in there. I mean, whether it's, you know, as simple as, you know, a school of eels, or if there's a, you know, some sort of relative of a plesiosaur, who knows? You know, it's the water has always been like that area that we don't go, you know, like I mean, it's still just like a place of mystery. And I think, you know, like in modern day times, you know, we're all talking about going to space, but I mean, there's still like so much underwater stuff that we can't even touch.
Yeah.
I mean, it's insane. So I think that, like I was talking about before, like that sense of mystery, like I think that has a lot to, like, it just takes hold of your brain. And I mean, you just kind of go crazy about it, honestly. So yeah, I mean, I don't really know, like, I don't know if it's like a real thing, or if it's something that we've kind of like created, you know, in our psyche, you know, that's that kind of like a collective consciousness kind of thing, you know, where every part of civilization has their own, you know, mystery around the water, or if there's something to it, you know, I don't know. They got those. There's somebody just posted pictures of, quote unquote, the Loch Ness monster. So who knows?
The Loch Ness monster butt picture.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. They just did that giant search for Loch Ness where they had like all those people meet up there and stuff. And
yeah,
I guess those pictures were part of it or something. It is kind of crazy, though, that we spend so much money and effort to explore space whenever we haven't even began to touch what's in the ocean.
Right? It's so weird. It boggles my mind, actually. Like, because I feel like there are things in the water that we would just, like, our brains would explode. Like there could be dinosaurs, like plesiosaurs and stuff. I mean, there could be something ancient, you know, down there that, you know, we just have no idea about.
I grew up, our state has a lot of lakes, and I mean, it's not just Oklahoma. A lot of states have this myth, you know, the story of like a diver was at a dam and went down and saw a gigantic catfish that looked like it was big enough to swallow a Volkswagen Beetle. It's like a common thing. Like, I grew up hearing that story, and then I like talked to other people that heard the same story from other places, and I was like, oh, so it's a thing then. But I mean, yeah, you know, I've personally seen gigantic catfish being pulled out of the lake before.
Oh yeah.
And those are just the ones we're catching. So there could be something absolutely enormous just sitting at, you know, just a bottom feeder down in the depths of the ocean somewhere that hardly ever moves, and we wouldn't know anything about it.
Yeah, we're too busy looking up.
Oh man, that's a beautiful segue, actually.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
The exact same thing.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about first the White Monster of Sherman.
Yes.
You illustrated that book by, I guess, the Moth Boys. is that the right nomenclature to use for the authors of that?
It is a Moth Boys presentation. Yep. And yeah, they did all the legwork really to research this, and as the story goes, they grew up in and around the Chautauqua County area, and Sherman is, the county over. And there was this book, it's by John Keel. I think it's called like Mysterious Monsters, something like that. I can't remember the exact title. But there was an excerpt in there where, John Keel was adding in, correspondence he got from people talking about monsters that they've seen. And there was one entry from a kid in Sherman County, and he was saying that he and his family were seeing these giant albino ground sloths in Western New York in the 1960s.
Crazy.
And yeah, just wild stuff. And the Moth Boys were inspired by this story because, it's their local legend, basically, that nobody knows about. So they wanted to get the story out. They obviously wanted to find the kid who saw these creatures, and damn it, they did it. It was it blew my mind,
dude. If I could give them an award, like, that's nuts, man. That's nuts. It's little nuts. Part of a book written ages ago, before they were ever born,
right?
Talking about some kid that they don't give the kid's name or anything, and these guys tracked him down.
They did. And honestly, I don't even really know how they did it. Maybe I shouldn't know how they did it. But they found him. His name is John Goodwill. I think he's in his 70s right now. I met him once at Mothman last year, at the Mothman Festival last year. And I've met his brothers since, who have all seen the white monsters as well when they were kids. But yeah, they found him. They interviewed him. And, John took them out to the spots in Sherman County where they saw the white monsters. There's this, it's called the Rails to Trails. And basically it's an abandoned railroad section that they've taken the railroad tracks out and made walking paths on. And that was like the primary, centric area where they would see the white monsters, going up and down that railroad path. And so John took them out there, they took photos and stuff, and then, they compiled this book, and they asked me to do the illustrations for it. And I mean, I couldn't be prouder of this. I mean, it's such a wild story, and it's so cool.
Yeah. It's crazy. I mean, it's a giant ground sloth, but it's a family of them.
Right.
And I mean, okay, so whenever you say that somebody saw a family of albino giant ground sloths in the 1960s in this small town, obviously anybody who hears that is initially just going to be like, bullshit. No, right. No, there's no way. Those things aren't even fast, and they're huge. How would they ever hide? But then whenever you read the actual story where, their interview with the guy, and realize he wasn't the only one that saw them. And it was, I mean, if they're lying, they've got me fooled. I mean, it sounds true as hell.
I tell you, I have met all of them, and they're the most genuine, awesome people. Like, they have no reason, to say this stuff. When, I mean, it's not like they're getting a ton of money or anything out of this, It's like,
he was like a retired teacher, wasn't he?
Yeah, he's a biology teacher. So he said he went into biology partly because of this. Like, he didn't know what he was looking at. So I feel like that seed almost kind of brought him to what he was going to do as an adult, which is kind of cool.
And you know how it is in those small towns like that, man. You don't want to be the guy that lied and said he saw a giant white sloth,
Right. They have no reason to lie about it. And I, for one, and I know a lot of people do, they believe them 100%. There's no reason for them to go out on a limb and say something ridiculous,
Okay, so we're both on the same page that this guy's telling the truth.
Yeah.
How? How are those grounds? How? Where are they? Aliens? What's going on?
See, I don't know. And I mean, it's funny that you would say that, aliens, because we actually went out to the swamp and we experienced some UFO activity, which is just this. I swear this place, Sherman, New York, is some kind of breeding ground for the weird. It's wild, man. Do you want me to tell the story?
Yeah, let's unpack it, man. I mean, like, what were you doing there? Who were you with? What was going on?
Okay. So, as we said, we put together this book, The White Monsters of Sherman, New York, and we had this table. The Moth Boys invited me up to Sherman, New York, because Sherman was having their 200th anniversary, their bicentennial, and they were having this big parade, and they had vendors and food and all kinds of awesome stuff there. It was a really good event. But we had a little table set up, with our books, and the Moth Boys printed up some White Monsters t-shirts and stuff like that. And really, it was just an opportunity to get out with the local people and talk to them and try to introduce them to this kind of like weird history of their area that they may not know of, that most people had no clue of. So that was a really cool part of it, was, being in Sherman and talking to the Shermanites. I don't know if that's what you call them, but because, I mean, that was, like I said before, you go to these events and people just come up to you with their stories, and it was like, everybody's got a weird story, and we were able to hand them back a weirder story, and it was just kind of like up in the ante to see what they would come back with. But yeah, so we were there promoting the book and shedding light on weird history. And that night, the Moth Boys were like wanting to show me their stomping grounds and stuff like that. And so we went to like their local pizza joint, their ice cream joint. They showed me great hospitality and stuff while I was up there. And we decided that night that we wanted to go do a night investigation in the swamp where the White Monsters had been sighted back in the 1960s. And so we went out to the rails to trails, and we were equipped with headlamps and flashlights and machetes, of course.
Sure.
As one does when on a night investigation in a swamp.
When you're cryptid hunting.
So we were out there, and we walked maybe a mile and a half to maybe even 2 miles. I kind of lost count of it, down this rails to trails. It was just it used to be a railroad track, so we were just a straight shot through the woods, through the swamp. And we got pretty far into a place where we were like, is this even really the rails to trails anymore? Like, should we turn around? Are we on someone's property? So we were getting a little freaked out about that. So we decided to go back. And we got to this one area where it kind of opened up, and, you could see the swamp, you could see the mountain and the night sky. And Matt, Moth Boy Matt, calls attention to a star, or what we thought was a star at first. He was like, man, look at that. That's a weird one. And it was a very big looking light in the sky, kind of an orangish hue to it. And we all kind of locked onto it. Like, I don't know. I mean, we thought it was kind of weird because it was kind of hanging low, like kind of sort of right above the mountaintop. And, I say mountaintop, it's more like a rolling hill mountain,
Yeah.
But this thing, it's upstate, Western New York. So, I mean, there's not like huge mountains or anything like that, but, it was sitting sort of, above the tree line of the mountain, and it just looked really low for a star. So we all kind of locked onto it, and we realized that it was moving up very slowly. Like, it was almost like if you weren't looking right at it or locked onto something next to it, you wouldn't be able to tell it was moving at all. So that's what we did. We kind of like locked onto a star next to it, and you could tell it was moving very slowly up. And as we all kind of realized that it was moving and sort of vocalizing to each other, hey, it's moving, it started to move faster. And it moved up and up and up, and then totally blinked out. It just totally went out. And we all were like kind of freaking out a little bit, but in like a good way. Like we were all like very excited at this point. And as it went out, we could tell behind it, there were blinking lights. And we were like, at first thought maybe it was a plane, and of course, skeptical stuff going through your brain. But then they started coming closer to us, and we were like, okay, this is kind of strange. So there was like, I think two blinking lights that were kind of coming towards us. One was kind of going off to the left, and one was coming right towards us. And we just kind of waited for it, and it went right over our heads. And when we looked up, we all saw this. It was a dark shape that was darker than the sky behind it, and it was a perfect diamond shape with 4 lights underneath of it. It was making absolutely no noise, and it flew right over our heads, and it disappeared behind the mountain behind us. And we all were just like, holy crap, that is the weirdest thing we've ever seen. And so it didn't stop there. As soon as that went over our heads, and we were all kind of like, talking about it, and we were all really hyped up, Matt saw again that same light over by the mountain again. It was a little bit lower in the sky, but it was still sitting very low, like right on the mountain. And as soon as he called attention to it, and as soon as we all looked at it, it went out again. It just blinked out right there. Like, this is this is over. You don't see anymore. So yeah, I mean, we were, and a couple other things. We saw a couple other questionable lights in the sky at that time, but that was like the most significant part. And for me, the most significant was actually seeing the diamond fly over my head. It was insane, like absolutely insane.
I mean, I'm no expert, but I believe that's what they call a UFO.
Right? I mean, there's, nothing else you can call it.
I mean, damn, dude. Have you guys like reported it or anything?
I don't think that we have. I mean, I think we've all talked about it on a podcast or two at this point.
Well, yeah.
But no, we haven't like reported it officially to my knowledge. No.
I mean, as soon as I heard about it on the interwebs, I hit you up immediately.
Yeah, you did.
And asked you about it. That's crazy. One of the aspects that, again, is the most crazy about it is you definitely feel that there was like an intelligent interaction whenever it blinked out that last time.
Well, honestly, I felt like there was an interaction the entire time. Like, I mean, from when we noticed it in the sky above the mountain, and then as the rest of our group, there were 5 of us there that night, as the rest of us in our group all kind of locked onto it, that's when it started. It was like, oh, you recognize me? Watch this. That was kind of that energy starting out with. Yeah. And then it was the diamond, which got us really hyped up. And then the light at the end that went out when we drew attention to it. That one was a little bit creepier for some reason. And Matt, Mike, and myself all kind of reported afterwards that when that light went out at the end, we all kind of got chills. Actually, I'm getting chills right now talking about it. That was kind of a weird one, I felt like. And I can't really explain why. I don't know if it was just the feeling that, it was interacting with us on that level that gave us chills. I don't know. I don't know what it was, but yeah, that just felt different.
Maybe it was whenever you discovered that you were missing like 8 hours.
No. We actually checked our watches,
just afterwards. In case.
just to make sure. When when you run in these circles, you kind of have to check all these boxes.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it was wild.
Have you gone down the UFO rabbit hole because of it?
No more than normal. I've always been kind of interested in UFOs. I admit not as much as like cryptids and, you know, Bigfoot and stuff, but or ghosts for that matter.
I mean, it's definitely a crazy time for UFO stuff.
It is. Yeah, it really is. And I think I will be, you know, getting, you know, deeper down into that rabbit hole as, you know, things progress. And hopefully I see more because that was a wild thing.
Have you followed any of the disclosure stuff going on?
Yeah, I mean, I watched the hearing and everything like that. And I mean, while it's exciting and I think, you know, it kind of opens the door for other people who may have felt, you know, like they can't speak up, you know, it gives them a little bit more confidence. You know, I think that's a good part of it. But also it's kind of like, I feel like the hearings and, you know, like the official kind of stuff is kind of like dumbing it down a little bit, like so much so that it's almost like not fun anymore. I don't know. That's just me being, you know.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of that stuff is really just for the sake of the government paperwork and stuff.
Yes.
And not really accomplishing what anybody wants to have accomplished.
Yeah, so I mean that's kind of my stance on it. Like I'm all for, you know, giving the power to people to, you know, feel confident and coming forward and, you know, talking about their weird experiences and stuff like that. But when, you know, the only reason, you know, you're bringing this stuff to light is, you know, for national security or, you know, that, I don't know, it just kind of seems like it's, you know, the government being the government.
Changing up a bit. Have you ever seen a ghost?
I have seen a ghost. Yeah. I think I've talked about this a couple times. But that was actually like probably one of the first weird things that I've ever seen in my life. I was on a field trip, to historic Kenmore, and, the Kenmore plantation was a working plantation, in, you know, like the 1700s, in Fredericksburg, Virginia. And the guy that owned Kenmore, his name was Fielding Lewis, and he married George Washington's sister, Mary. I was on a field trip there. We were, you know, kind of being rambunctious kids, you know, like kind of running around this historical building, and we were supposed to be, you know, paying attention to the tour that was happening. And me and a friend were kind of like, you know, roaming around looking into the rooms and stuff like that. And I can remember one of the rooms, the door was kind of like cracked, and you could see through the back of like where the hinges are, the back of the door into the room. So I was looking through that, and I saw what looked like a person in the bed, in this, you know, historical bed, and this like brownish white hair coming down out of the bed. And I got a really weird feeling at that point and decided to get the heck out of there. And to this day, you know, I believe that was a ghost. Like I was witness to something going on in that room that was weird.
I mean, there's no shot that somebody was laying down in that bed.
Right.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, it sounds like it was something that was like actually fully manifested.
And it looked totally solid. Yeah. Which, you know, I always kind of end this story with, you know, maybe it was one of the tour guides on their 15-minute break, but you know, there's no reason for that to happen. I mean, they don't do that kind of stuff there. And I don't know, I can remember, I think when you see something like that and it sticks with you your entire life, like I can still see it in my brain. And I'm the type of person, you know, I may not remember what I have for breakfast in the morning,
right,
but this is burned into my brain. And I think that's significant.
Yeah.
In a lot of these situations, I think that's a significant thing.
There's a guy who, another podcaster, and again, I won't mention any names, but more recently they've talked more about it, but they have a Bigfoot podcast, and they started noticing some things happening around their property. And they do live on some property where, you know, it's not like they're in the middle of the city like me or anything. But they were very skeptical, and I think they still are skeptical, which is great. You have to kind of be that, you know, to not get carried away with it or anything. But they weren't willing to commit to saying like, hey, I think I have Bigfoot coming on my property, you know? And they were really just kind of being overly skeptical about it, which again, I do understand, having grown up in the Bigfoot community. But I was talking to somebody else about it, and I said, you know, the thing is, if they didn't at least think it was Bigfoot, they wouldn't be talking about it. It wouldn't be standing out to them. And I think that our minds have a way of, you know, like you're saying, whenever you remember something your entire life and it's just ingrained in your mind, that's a pretty good clue that it's real. that you saw something and your mind recognized it for something that isn't supposed to be there, whether you did or not.
You may not be able to prove it at all, but you always have that feeling. Yeah. I definitely identify with that.
Like the paranormal stuff, ghosts and things like that. I mean, geez, my entire life, you know. Mm-hmm. That's kind of how I got, you know, started in all of this. And I've experienced some things, and it blows my mind, because with Bigfoot, I mean, you know, like, you're in the cryptid community, you're a cryptid artist. I've seen you do artwork of all different kinds of cryptids. I mean, you've got crazy ones, you know. There's absolute crazy ones. But Bigfoot's on a whole different level, because people routinely report seeing Bigfoot, where you don't have, like, next week, nobody's going to report seeing a hodag, you know. It's just not going to happen. But ghosts, everybody's seen a ghost. Ghosts have been seen forever. They've been talked about forever. And it just kind of blows my mind that people, I mean, the White House is haunted. There are ghosts seen in the White House, but yet people are still skeptical about there being spirits and ghosts and stuff. It's just kind of crazy to me.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. Have you ever gone into any detail on your experiences? Like, I don't know if I've ever heard of any.
Man, honestly, this isn't a weird flex or anything. There's just been so many. Like, I've probably shared a few here and there on, like, other podcasts. I don't think I've really touched on them with this one, but yeah, I mean, I was experiencing things as a small child.
Oh, wow. That's terrifying.
Yeah. Whenever I was born, there was like 5 generations alive at once.
Oh, wow.
I was raised by my great grandparents, but for the first year and a half, roughish, my great grandmother was alive and living in this house, and she actually passed away in this house.
Wow.
I'm pretty sure that was like the first spirit activity that I noticed, but there was like another ghost in this house that did some pretty gnarly stuff before I was ever born.
Oh, geez.
I had an uncle, you know, my mom and like her brothers and sister this was their grandparents' house, so they were always over here and staying the night and stuff. And one time, whenever they were over here staying the night, whenever they were younger, my uncle was actually attacked.
Oh, wow.
He was like laying on the living room floor on a pallet. And he said that he like rolled over. I think it was winter time. We have like a gas fireplace in the living room, and I think it was on at the time. But he said that he couldn't get comfortable, and he like rolled over towards the fire, and he just like opened his eyes, and he saw a man's face in the back of the fireplace. And then it, you know, scared the crap out of him. So he like kind of rolled over on his back where he couldn't see it anymore. and he felt somebody like sit on his chest and like start choking him.
Oh my goodness.
And I mean, like, he was like fighting, and my mom was asleep on the couch and woke up hearing like the struggle and everything, and saw him like wrestling with somebody, but nobody was there. And then as soon as I think she like, you know, screamed or something, and it just like immediately stopped, and he just sat up real fast, like gasping for air.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That's wild, man.
Yeah.
Holy crap.
So there's that.
So you live in this house.
Yeah. I still live here. I ended up actually inheriting the house, and I still live here. And sometimes weird stuff happens, but nothing crazy. Kind of gone through some precautionary steps to make sure that nothing crazy happens, or at least hopefully. But yeah. And
do you have a? Sorry, I don't mean to.
No, by all means.
Okay, well, I'm just wondering, like, what your thoughts are on, and I know this could go on for hours and hours, but what your thoughts are on what that could be. Like, what do you think that's an intelligent, you know, spirit, a person that the spirit was a person, or do you think it was something different?
Yeah, that's a good question. But I do think that was a person, which is kind of jacked up, you know, that he was like strangling a young boy. But so my great grandparents were the second owners of this house. And I only know this information because of the events that I experienced as a kid and doing research on my own, trying to understand what I was experiencing, you know, because I had asked my grandparents, and my grandfather would just be like, not talking about it, you know. My grandma was like, oh, those are just guardian angels. Don't worry about them. You know, if you get scared, just come to us.
They're sitting on your chest, choking you to death. It's fine. They'll be cool.
Like, what kind of angel is that? But, I mean, like, nothing crazy like that was happening to me, obviously. But so I started asking questions and found out that the original owners of the house was a husband and wife. They were older. I think they were visiting kids or on vacation or something, like a state away. And while they were on this trip, they got into a car accident, and the husband died, and the wife came home and sold the house eventually to my great grandparents. And I just kind of always felt like that's the jerk, you know, that was the mean entity that was here.
Well, you know, from his point of view, you guys are in his house.
Yeah.
Somebody's in his house.
Exactly.
Who's sleeping on the floor in my house?
Yeah.
You know, jump on him.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's wild.
Yeah.
That's probably one of the more intense ones I've ever heard. Like, I don't know if I've ever heard of, you know, other than like a TV show or a movie, of a spirit actually attacking someone like that.
Yeah. I mean, there's been like a few instances over the years, some creepy stuff. I felt like a finger on my leg, kind of like running down towards my knee while I was laying in bed. Yeah. That was one of the creepier ones, but yeah. But yeah, some things have definitely happened in this house. And I mean, I'm not the only one that's saying this stuff. Like, other people have been here and witnessed stuff. My friend Bob from Bigfoot Club had his first visual sighting of a ghost in this house.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And it was kind of crazy because the one that he saw was like one of the more common occurrences that happens in this house, which was probably like a residual thing. But I had never told him that particular story or anything.
I mean, that just adds credence to what's been going on, you know? I mean,
yeah.
Someone experiences it without knowing and then comes to you and you're like, oh yeah, you know, that's
oh yeah, that's this. Yeah, but there's definitely something to it. So
do you think all ghosts are dead people, or do you think there are different kinds? And
I think there's different kinds, man.
See, that's kind of like what I've been thinking about this a lot too. Like, I don't know. I mean, I feel like there's different types of ghosts, and it's not all one thing, and it could be a bunch of different things. So I don't know. I've never understood like why people always say that it's like, you know, this is, my grandmother over here, I mean,
Right.
Is it? I don't know.
I mean, I think that happens a lot, though, with a lot of things. Whenever you're talking about the world of the unexplained, I mean, we don't know anything about any of that stuff. We just know that people witness it and experience things. I mean, I think the same thing could be going on with Bigfoot. Just because you're out in the woods looking for Bigfoot doesn't mean something crazy you experience is Bigfoot. It could be something else entirely. We don't know. And if Bigfoot's out there, that was one of my first thoughts, after I encountered Bigfoot, which sounds crazy even now, 20 plus years to say. But if Bigfoot's out there, what else is out there? Because Bigfoot's not supposed to be here. That's crazy.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
So one more topic before we get off here. I mentioned Robert Dominguez, Bigfoot Club, and he had a question that he wanted me to ask you.
Okay. Hey, Bob.
Yeah, you did his logo too. So great job on that.
I'm wearing the shirt, actually. Now that I realize I'm actually wearing the Bigfoot Club shirt.
It's an awesome shirt.
It's one of my favorite shirts.
So he wanted me to ask you about your thoughts as an artist about AI art and how crazy viral it is. And it's something that kind of pertains to this subject because there's a ton of AI art being used by Bigfoot podcasts and just showing up on Bigfoot Facebook groups and Instagram accounts and everywhere. So what are your thoughts as an artist?
Well, as an artist, I'm, kind of like, just hire me to draw your Bigfoot. I feel like it is kind of, taking some jobs away from me and, my colleagues. So, I mean, I'm not a huge fan of it. Also, I mean, you can do some really insane stuff with it. Like, it's very powerful, but I also don't think it's, very ethical, because of the softwares right now are, pulling from actual artists, who have created stuff, with their, own two hands.
Right.
And, just because you pull, this from this artist and this from this artist and mash it up together, that I don't know that necessarily makes a piece of art,
Yeah.
The human aspect has been taken away from it. And, at the end of the day, I would like to see AI be used for, taking some of the pressures off of, like, hard jobs, like why do the robots get to sit around, creating art and writing and making poetry, and we have to do, the 9-to-5 jobs.
Isn't that kind of weird?
Right. Yeah. Why is that the first thing that they think of to replace?
It seems like as soon as AI was introduced to the public, it just instantly went to the art realm and like Chat GPT, what would Donald Trump say to an alien? Stuff like that.
Right.
Instead of what's a cure for cancer?
Yeah.
What's an unlimited energy source? Things like that.
Right.
People would rather make photos with it. It's weird. The downside, especially in the world of Bigfoot, and I'm sure it's going on in other places, but I mean, already you see AI being used to hoax photographs.
Yes.
And AI renderings being presented as real. How can that be fought against? Can it be fought against? I mean, surely it's only going to get worse as AI progresses.
Yeah. And I mean, they were probably thinking this, when, photographs were created, or movies, I can remember, I think it was a documentary that I watched where they were, when, sound was introduced into movies, people thought that, movies were going to be, complete crap, after that, like, so I think really any, technology that kind of comes out, I think people are going to fear it right off the bat. And I think AI can be useful, as, like I was saying, like with some of these, bigger problems, and like what you were saying, like, why can't we, use it to to cure diseases and stuff like that, as opposed to writing poetry or, creating paintings. Yeah.
All right. Where can we find Jonathan Dodd's artwork?
You can find me, probably the best place to find me would be on Instagram. My Instagram handle is JonathanDodd_draws. And I also have a website. It's JonathanDoddDraws.com.
Do you got any big projects coming up that we can look forward to in the cryptid community? Actually, yeah. Me and my brother are currently writing a graphic novel. So hopefully, that'll be out, in the next year or two. So that's kind of like one of my big projects that I have on my plate right now. What's it about? Can you say? I would rather not talk about it right now because it's so early. Fair enough. Yeah, sorry. Sorry to be so cryptic. Well, man, I appreciate you coming on. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Like you said, it was long overdue. I'm glad it finally happened, and we will have to do it again sometime. Yeah, man, anytime. This was a blast. I really appreciate you having me on. I'm a huge fan of the show. Really glad that you and I have become close over the last couple of years, and yeah, let's do this again. Yeah, for sure, man. And if you've encountered something like Bigfoot or something else unexplained, send me an email at bigfootcrossroads@gmail.com. Check out the website if you get a chance, bigfootcrossroads.com. And until next time, remember, there's something in the woods.